So it's my privilege to introduce this year's lightning talks. This is always a fan favorite. So this is our 5-minute talks from Stoic practitioners. So far, we've heard mostly from academics, people who are professional Stoic experts, and now this is people from all walks of life, all over the world, who use Stoicism in their daily lives to do amazing things. So I'm very happy to share this with you. We have a wonderful selection of talks covering everything from nature photography to public speaking to dealing with hardship and grief. And at the end of all 8 videos together, you'll see contact information where you can learn more about each speaker. And I'll also put their bios into the chat. So I would strongly encourage you to check out their websites and podcasts. They're all doing amazing work in their own very different ways. So before we begin, I'd like to thank our contributors, Anne Gehrmann, Becky Smoke, Erik Hogan, Meredith, Hadleigh Fischer, Katie Stidolph, Sarah Mikutel, and Vanessa Morgenstern. And everyone, I hope you enjoy this year's lightning talks.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Morgenstern, and I'm the founder of the Stoic Dahlia blog and podcast and facilitator of Portia's Porch, a live monthly session for women to come together from around the world and share their experiences and applications of Stoic philosophy. I'm also a recovering reactor. I wish I could say that my journey to Stoic philosophy was through academic study or philosophical courses, but I'm no expert. Where my expertise lies, with 41 years of experience, is being a woman, a role that led me through turbulent stages to the point of overwhelm, that one day it landed me on the floor. Yet that same pivotal moment also propelled me to rise and led me to sit here before you today. In 2017, a year and a half after having my second child, which was a significant life change, it challenged my self-worth and identity. Only I couldn't pinpoint it back then. My life on paper hit all the check boxes. A happy marriage, check. A healthy baby, check, check. I was even my own boss by my mid-30s, check, check, check. And now I got to be a stay-at-home mom. Yet there I was, crying. And I'm talking full-on ugly crying on the cold hardwood floor. Around that same time, I confessed to my husband that I wanted to go back to work, like outside of the house, and I would do anything. Motherhood wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed purpose, is the word I think I used. And the look on my husband's face, it wasn't of disappointment or disgust, but a sadness, which made me feel even worse. Did I just make the worst confession in the history of being a woman ever? Epictetus famously says, "When I see a man anxious, I say, what does this man want? If he did not want something which is not in his power, how could he be anxious?" That sadness in my husband's eyes, that was a misunderstanding. It was not me wanting out, it was me wanting. As women navigate unprecedented opportunities today, with so many paths to choose from now, should I have children? Should I not have children? Pursuing a career? Should I get married or should I stay single? Trying to have it all. There's a rise in anxiousness. Epictetus invited me to ask myself, what if having it all wasn't about adding, but by removing? What if it's about peeling back layers to reveal our genuine values? Today, both men and women face unique challenges in trying to live authentically in a world full of expectations. One out of many of my focuses is helping women to achieve self-actualization through their Stoic practices. For me, that process unexpectedly initiated a journey of generational healing. Healing. a word that is not the first thing we associate with this philosophy, yet it is a powerful byproduct from the unlearning of societal norms, historical expectations, my childhood conditioning that I once believed shaped my identity. Across my many platforms, I present Stoic principles in a relatable, digestible way, helping women apply them to their unique lives. This approach aids in reaching their core selves while navigating the tension between logical thinking and our cultural conditioning. Sometimes it's through articles where I ask reflective questions like, how did you love before you were hurt? Exploring how past heartbreak informs future relationships. Other times it's through traditional exercises like journaling conflicts, using distortion versus reality to identify triggers and patterns, what I heard versus what was really said. I also use physical exercises like fear dates, inspired by Seneca's wisdom that imagination often exaggerates fear compared to reality. And within each of these exercises, there's an opportunity to practice virtue, a key aspect that makes Stoicism unique and is often overlooked by contemporary self-development leaders today. Stoicism is a rich and multifaceted philosophy, and I believe it not only mirrors the complex nature of a woman's life, but it also complements it. Thank you for having me today. And I just want to say that I'm so grateful to be part of the modern Stoicism community, one that not only supports me in deepening my understanding of Stoicism, but explores ideas like this with me. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Becky Smoke, and I'm the founder of Stoic Edge Consulting. I am also a keynote speaker and an author, and my focus is on leadership. All right, let's just dive right in. I want to tell you about this one Stoic quote that has a massive impact on my relationships and how I navigate them and deal with all the twists and turns that life's relationships bring at us. This is a quote. It comes from Marcus Aurelius, and it challenges us. He says, whenever you're about to find fault with somebody, ask yourself the following question. Which fault of my own most closely resemble the one that I'm about to criticize? In other words, before you go pointing that finger at somebody else and calling their shit out, I hope I can say that, take a hot second and consider, how do you compare? And by compare, I mean like, are you also a flawed human being? And I'll just kind of give you the answer right now. And the answer is yes, you are. We all have faults. And as unique and special as we all are, it's pretty likely that you can find something that you do that's relatively close to the person that's driving you crazy. But when you're able to, get off a high horse and stand next to somebody when you talk to them, not only can they hear you better, the likelihood that they actually listen goes up. Because I'm way more likely to not just listen to you, but care about what you have to say and believe that you actually care about me when you lead with vulnerability. When you're willing to tell me, hey, I've struggled with this too, or I used to have this issue too. And you're able to share with me what you did to change or what you're currently doing to try to change. Well, then I feel like we're on the same team. It's really tempting to want to stay on that high horse. It's easier to. It's harder to climb down. But as you know with Stoicism, most things are hard when you start off. But the more you do it, the easier it does become. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of confidence. But if you can do that, then you can also employ one of my other favorite quotes when it comes to relationships. You thought there was only one, but I'm speaking of the second one, which is another Marcus Aurelius one where he says, ask yourself this in every moment. Is this necessary? Okay, guys, if you want to avoid kind of silly arguments, if you want to avoid unnecessary kind of conflicts, disagreements, whatever word you want to choose in relationships, well, pause a second and ask yourself if what you're about to do or say is necessary. Does it actually help you achieve what it is you're wanting to achieve? Yes, you have to sometimes have these difficult conversations. Yes, you should absolutely stand up for yourself and call things out when necessary, but the key words being when necessary. I know I am very guilty of nagging my kids about things that I really ought to not nag them on because it doesn't actually have any productive value. I know there have been times where I've called my husband out on something he didn't do or did wrong when I really didn't need to. We make mistakes. We do. But I know that when I've taken the time to really focus in on just even those two quotes, those two lessons, I make fewer mistakes. Partially because I say fewer things. Because we also know from the Stoics that sometimes we ought to just keep our mouth shut and we don't have to have an opinion about everything. And we are better off when we spend more time truly listening than speaking. So having said that, I'm going to take that advice and end this right here. And thank you all, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.
Hi, my name is Gary Meredith. Most people know me as Gaz. I'm a nature photographer based in Perth in Western Australia. Today I'd like to share how the philosophy of Stoicism has had a profound influence on not just my approach to photography, but my life as a whole. For me, Stoicism offers a framework for processing life with greater clarity and purpose. And as a music lover, and in particular Pearl Jam, I often find philosophical insights within their lyrics, as many other people do within poetry, etc. One particular song that resonates with my Stoic beliefs comes from a song, I Am Mine. Essentially, Eddie Vedder opens the song with the lyrics, the selfish, they're all standing in line, faithing, hoping to buy themselves time. Me, I figure as each breath goes by, I only own my mind. To me, this reflects a core principle of Stoicism, particularly from the philosopher Epictetus, who teaches us that while we can't control external events or want things, like living a long time, we can always control our thoughts and actions. It's a mindset that's become central in how I approach my work and life. As a nature photographer, Stoicism feels like the perfect fit. A key tenet of Stoicism is the idea that living in agreement with nature, not just in terms of the natural world, but also by recognizing ourselves as part of a greater whole. Through photography, I get the privilege of capturing moments and scenes that often go unnoticed, allowing others to see and appreciate the beauty around us. For me, nature photography is more than just an artistic endeavour. It's a way of showing the interconnectedness of life, something Stoicism emphasises. What's more, Stoicism has deepened my sense of responsibility toward nature. It encourages me to give back, especially to those parts of nature that cannot defend themselves or protect themselves. This is why I often donate my images to conservation projects or share them freely with causes that promote the preservation of our environment. In doing so, I feel I'm contributing in even a small way to the larger whole. Interestingly, Stoicism has also pushed me out of my comfort zone. As an introvert, engaging with others, whether in photography clubs or out in the field or in the general public, it was not something that came natural to me. But Stoicism teaches that we are social beings and that meaningful connections with others are part of living a virtuous life. Because of this philosophy, I've been willing to push myself to connect with like-minded individuals. These interactions have opened up opportunities I would never have otherwise discovered. Stoicism has allowed me to balance my introversion with the desire for purposeful community. Another unexpected benefit of Stoicism is how it's shifted my perspective on success. Before embracing Stoicism, I would often tie my emotions to the external validation I received, especially in terms of how well my photos performed or received by others. If an image didn't get the recognition I hoped for, it would affect me emotionally. Stoicism has taught me that true contentment doesn't come from outside approval, but from aligning my actions with my values. By focusing on what I can control, like my effort, my craft, my passion, I've let go of the need for external validation. Ironically, this has made my life richer, even if it doesn't always help my social media presence. I no longer feel drained by the need to constantly chase likes, comments, etc. Instead, I can enjoy my work for what it is, a personal expression of my connection with nature. So basically, Stoicism has brought mindfulness and purpose to both my photography and my life. It's given me a sense of gratitude for the natural world, and it's helped me approach my work with a deeper sense of meaning, free from the pressures of external success. So thank you for the opportunity to share how Stoicism has influenced my journey as a photographer and myself as a person.
Hi, I'm Sarah Mikutel, and I'm a communication and mindset coach for introverts. And today I'm going to share how I use Stoicism to help my clients reduce their public speaking anxiety and become more calm, confident communicators. So if you've ever felt nervous presenting in meetings or voicing your ideas in groups, this presentation is for you. And I could talk about communication and Stoicism all day, but we only have about 5 minutes together, so I'm going to focus on 3 key areas. 1, understanding public speaking anxiety. 2, Stoic strategies to manage anxiety. And 3, applying role ethics in communication. So let's start with why we feel anxious when speaking publicly, and we'll use an example. So imagine Michelle is a bright and dedicated professional. She spent hours preparing for her presentation. So she really knows her material and she has a great rapport with her colleagues. But as she stands in front of the room before the meeting begins, her heart races, she feels shaky, and panic really starts to set in. These immediate involuntary sensations are completely natural, and as we Stoics know, they're not up to Michelle. Her fight or flight response is kicking in to keep her safe, even though she's not in any real danger. So if Michelle were my client, I would guide her to take deep belly breaths to slow down her breathing, relax her body, and stand in a position that feels grounded and stable. And most importantly, to accept what's happening instead of resisting it. Michelle can remind herself, my body is reacting as if I'm in danger, but I'm not. I'm safe. I'm prepared. By challenging the false impression that she's in a high-stakes, threatening situation, Michelle can begin to calm her mind and her body. Now, let's say this anxiety stems from the belief that Michelle has to be perfect or everyone's going to judge her. Here's where Stoic reasoning can help. So a thought pops into Michelle's mind. If my presentation isn't perfect, they're going to think I'm incompetent. She starts to feel anxious. But then she pauses and evaluates this impression. Does the presentation need to be flawless to be valuable? No, her colleagues are much more interested in her insights and her effort than any potential imperfections. Plus, she's prepared well and she knows her material. So, Michelle chooses not to assent to the impression that her presentation must be perfect or she'll be judged. Instead, she reminds herself, I'm here to contribute and share my work, not to have to impress everyone with a flawless performance. So her focus shifts to delivering her message clearly and authentically. And based on this rational reflection, instead of running away, Michelle steps forward and presents with more equanimity. She uses hand gestures to articulate her points and also to give her adrenaline a way to escape. And she focuses on connection instead of perfection. Now let's talk about the premeditation of adversity. And this is the Stoic practice of mentally preparing for obstacles. So before her presentation, Michelle can mentally prepare by visualizing how she would use her rational mind to respond to potential setbacks. So she can do things like practice accepting nerves as just natural physical sensations that she can simply allow. These come up when we care about something that's important to us. She can practice responding to a question she doesn't know with a plan to follow up, addressing technical issues with humor, challenging unhelpful thoughts with more useful ones. There's lots of things that she can visualize before her meeting. And by visualizing rational responses to challenges, Michelle increases her emotional resilience and also her stress tolerance. And this allows her to face her fears with more poise and more equanimity. And she can also imagine her colleagues responding positively to her presentation and feel a sense of stoic joy that she showed up with courage and integrity. Now let's talk about role ethics and how to align your actions with your identity and your values. So Michelle realizes that part of her role as a colleague and team member is to share her insights and participate, even when it's uncomfortable. It's not about performing for others or having to prove herself. It's about contributing to the team and connecting authentically. Speaking up isn't a performance review. It's about collaboration and adding value. And this idea ties into what Epictetus said about the nervous lyre player. Epictetus explained that it's not the act of playing the lyre that was causing anxiety, but the belief that the audience's judgment determines one's worth. Michelle's fear of presenting comes from a similar misconception, that her value depends on external validation rather than her own virtues and efforts. And in Stoicism, we know that virtue is the only good and vice is the only true bad, and everything else, praise, criticism, success, failure, they are all indifference because it doesn't define who we are at our core. So Michelle has been wrongly valuing external praise as good and fearing criticism as bad, and this was making her overly anxious about how others perceive her. Instead, she's starting to learn to value the virtue of contributing her knowledge and supporting her team and fulfilling her role. And this is the true measure of success, not whether she receives praise or avoids criticism, but it's about developing her character and being a good person. By challenging her false impressions and properly categorizing what is good, bad, and indifferent, Michelle can shift her focus from seeking approval to fulfilling her role with integrity. She can remind herself that her worth is not determined by others' opinions, but by her commitment to acting with courage and contributing to the greater good. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I love meeting fellow Stoics. So if you would like to connect, you can find me at stoicwellbeing.com or sarahmikutel.com. You can visit me on Instagram at sarahmikutel, or you can listen to the Citizens of the World podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie, also known as the Savvy Stoic, and it's a pleasure speaking with you today at this year's Stoicon, and I'm excited to explore how Stoicism can help us in our relationships, both with others and also with ourselves. So I've been practicing Stoicism for nearly 6 years now, and it's been quite an interesting journey. And as a philosophy and classics graduate, I'm fascinated by how ancient wisdom, particularly that of the Stoics, can offer practical tools that can help us to live a better life. And today I'm looking forward to sharing some of those tools with you. So this is what we're going to briefly cover. We're going to talk about the Stoic virtues, a brief overview, Stoic tools for healthier relationships, memento mori and the dichotomy of control, and lastly, we're going to finish on the relationship with the self. So I'm sure many of you know about the Stoic virtues already, but as a brief recap, they are courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance, and these are the foundation for a good life. Every situation that we as Stoics find ourselves in is an opportunity to practice one or all four of these virtues, and they guide our actions, especially in relationships. So wisdom helps us with understanding, courage helps us to be honest and vulnerable, justice reminds us to treat others with respect and be kind, and lastly, temperance helps us to stay calm and rational even when emotions are running high. So these are just some of the Stoic tools that can help transform how we approach and show up in relationships. So building empathy through sympathia. So I found that in my personal experience, relationships often suffer when we fail to see the perspective of the other person, right? When we're just looking through our lens and not thinking about how that affects the other person or how they feel. And Stoicism really reminds us that we are all interconnected, and it encourages empathy by recognizing this, that we are all part of the same whole and that our actions affect others. Then we have apatheia, so building emotional resilience with apatheia, and then this is really helpful, especially during conflicts. So I found that conflicts often arise in relationships when we let our emotions dictate our reactions, right? When we're feeling angry, frustrated, when we say something that we don't mean to say. Stoicism teaches us to maintain emotional resilience, not by suppressing our emotions, by shoving them down and ignoring them, but by observing them, right? Recognizing how you feel, why you feel that way, without letting those emotions control our actions. So staying calm allows us to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. And finally, we have the dichotomy of control, which is all about focusing on what you can control. And I found that much of the problems in my relationships that I've had have been all about trying to control the other person, focusing on what you want to change about someone. And really, Epictetus says the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals, not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. So when it comes to relationships, try and think, okay, is this in my control? And if it isn't, let go and move on and focus on your judgments and your actions, which are two areas that you do have some control over. Then we have memento mori, which is one of my favourite Stoic principles, and this is all about remembering that we are mortal, remember that we will die, and it reminds us to appreciate that the people we love, we need to make time for, we need to appreciate them, we need to let them know that we love them. And Seneca said, life is long if you know how to use it. So tomorrow isn't guaranteed for anyone, including those we love, so make sure that you let them know how much you care about them. Marcus said you could leave life right now, let that determine what you do and say and think. In a world where we're often glued to our phones, distracted by social media and news, memento mori encourages us to put our devices down, to be present, and to truly engage with the people in front of us. So lastly, one of the most important relationships I think we have is that with ourselves. So Seneca says, what progress, you ask, have I made? I have begun to be a friend to myself. And this is one of my favourite Stoic quotes. So Stoicism's taught me to be less self-critical, shifting my focus from perfection to progress. And when we become better friends with ourselves, when we accept ourselves, flaws and all, we can really show up in our other relationships more fully. So as a final thought, I just want to encourage you to take a brief moment to reflect on your relationships, both with others and with yourself, and ask how can you apply Stoic principles to strengthen those connections. And remember Zeno, the founder of Stoicism's words when he said, "Well-being is realized by small steps, but is truly no small thing." So even small shifts in how we approach relationships, whether that's through empathy, gratitude, or resilience, can make a profound difference. Stoicism guides us in those small but powerful steps, helping us grow, connect, and show up as our best selves. So thanks so much for listening. If you want to stay in touch, you can contact me with the information on the screen. I really hope you've gained some insights into how these Stoic principles can support us in modern life and how they can help us build stronger relationships. If you would like to learn more, you can follow me at The Savvy Stoic or scan the barcode on the screen to subscribe to my Wise Words newsletter. I share weekly posts on Stoicism and the art of living well each Sunday, so yeah, it would be great if you sign up. And thanks again, and enjoy the rest of Stoicon.
My name's Hadleigh Fischer and I'm an Australian living in Switzerland. I've been reading about and living a poor imitation of the Stoic life for the last 10 or 12 years or so. I grew up in a family affected by mental illness. My mum, my dad, my brother have all been affected by bipolar, depression and addiction. And I was closely affected by mental ill health, yet I knew nothing about it. I wouldn't talk about it with anyone until I was 30, and I thought I was completely alone. And then I realised it wasn't just me, it was my friends and family and colleagues. Everyone knows someone touched by poor mental health. And my goal was to find out how I could avoid having the same kind of outcomes in my life as my family had. What could I do differently? So I went searching. I discovered positive psychology, neuroscience, and finally Stoicism. And over time, I wanted to share what I'd learnt with others. I thought this made so much sense because they don't teach you these things in schools, or I didn't learn them while I was doing philosophy at university. It was just so impractical. And over the last 7 or 8 years, I've been merging Stoic teachings with the wisdom of modern well-being science through a concept called mental fitness. And that's how I spend my time today, speaking and writing about mental fitness. And Stoicism wasn't always an academic pursuit for me. It's certainly not the case. I wanted it to be a really practical way I live my life. And I think it helped me over the last 35 years deal with some of the challenges that I've faced. But over the last 12 months, it's been probably the hardest 12 months of my life. I was struggling with my business. We were losing money and one of my businesses collapsed in the last 12 months. Some of my relationships were strained, and because I value people, I was wondering, is it me? What am I doing wrong here? And I was traveling around the world with my wife for 18 months in the developing world. And travel's hard enough at the best of times, let alone when you've got all these things going on around you. And just when I thought things couldn't get much more difficult, I received a call in June of this year from my brother. Our mum was in hospital, and my relationship with my mum was really close, despite living on the other side of the world. I've built my life around this flexible way of being able to visit her several times a year and support her. So when the doctors told me over the phone she's not going to make it, my world stopped. She had a lung infection. And within 8 hours, which is a miracle, I was on a 24-hour flight to Australia, which was the hardest journey of my life. And on that flight, the wisdom and all the reading and all the preparation that I'd done around Stoicism finally came into play. Now, I wasn't the cold, rational, sage-like Stoic we read about in Epictetus or Seneca, but the tools I'd studied over the years helped me stay calm. I needed to prepare myself for what I knew were going to be a really difficult few days, and I wanted to live in line with my values. And I spent the first 12 hours of that flight to Bangkok thinking I'm going to miss her, and I'm going to get a text halfway saying you haven't made it. Well, that text didn't come. And then I thought, well, I'm going to get a text in Melbourne when I land. She's been hanging on for 24 hours now. That text didn't come. And I got there at 9 o'clock at night, and my brother texted me and said, she's still going. Come out here on a taxi. And throughout that flight, I was upset. I was in the arms of my wife. And I was also trying to work through it the way Marcus Aurelius might have. I turned to my journal. I read the chapters from Epictetus and Meditations. And when I finally arrived, I was able to spend 4 really special hours with Mum, holding her hand, crying and laughing with my brother about all the silly things she'd done. And then she passed away. And then the Stoic lessons I'd tried over the years to learn came back to me. And I just want to outline 3 that were really valuable for me. First, the premeditation of evils. I'd been planning or thinking about or expecting Mum's passing for about a decade as her health declined. And I think over time I went from being really worried about it and finally learned not to fear it. I had pre-accepted it in some way. And what made Mum's passing at this point in time a surprise was just how well she was doing on my recent visit in March and April. Second, I wanted to focus on what was within my control. I realised that if I got there and saw her, how could I stay present with her? How could I create wonderful memories out of this? How do I banish my day-to-day concerns about money and my health and petty concerns and just be here now? And how do I support the people around me? And I asked myself, what good can come of this? And one outcome was much of the tension between my brother and I melted away as we bonded over Mum's passing. And I think this mindset was only possible in that moment because my mind was prepared in some way, partly due to the reading I'd done about the Stoics. And third, it was a reminder that sometimes the obstacle is the way. We'd had some challenges in the family over the last couple of years, providing for Mum and getting her support and all that sort of thing. She had health challenges. And it reminded me of my first real taste of using Stoicism for grief, which happened 4 years earlier when I was on a flight to Australia. All these things revolve around flights. When I was coming to visit my mum in January of 2020, just before COVID. And my dad died a couple of hours before my flight to Melbourne landed. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. And when I got to the airport, he was there. He was supposed to be there picking me up, and he wasn't. And I knew instantly that something was wrong. And on that plane journey, I'd been reading John Seller's book about Stoicism. And as I waited for the bus, I kept reading and thinking, well, hang on, there's something wrong here. How can I accept this? What's in my control? What can I do? And finally, staying at a friend's place in the city, I called the police. They waited several hours and went and did a welfare check. And at 5 a.m, they found him and they called me back. He'd had a heart attack and I had jet lag. It was midnight. And as I'd waited for that call from the police, I picked up the other Stoic book that I'd taken with me, which was The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And in that moment, I felt comfort and calm because I realised that some of the tension that my father had been a part of, that had prevented my brother being a part of the family, would dissipate. Mum would finally be, I guess, released from the shackles of living with Dad, and we moved her into a nursing home. And for the past 4 years, she got the support she needed and the social connection that she craved, and she was well cared for. And after a decade of struggle, she began to thrive, and she had a few more good years in there before she passed. And so that's what Stoicism means to me. It's a way of handling life setbacks and staying calm and resourceful under pressure. And I haven't grieved as stoically as I thought I might have prior to all this, and I think that's okay. But it reminds me of one of my favourite quotes of all time, which is, "This too shall pass." And I know that whether it's this or whatever comes in the future, I've got these tools and thoughts in my head ready to go for whatever adversity might come. I'm Hadleigh Fischer, and thanks for listening to my story.
Hi everyone, my name is Anne Gehrmann. I'm an author and a mom of 3 young children from Hamburg, Germany. Last year, my first book was published, a very personal account of how Stoic philosophy helps me to find calm in a world that sometimes spins faster than I can process it. While Stoicism is very helpful in daily life, its value as chosen philosophy of life comes to the test when life throws you lemons. In late spring of this year, I experienced such a lemony day. While I was taking care of my sick baby, all of a sudden I found myself in a life-threatening situation. When I forced a smile and waved my scared kids goodbye while I was brought into the ambulance to be driven to the ER, I knew that for the weeks to come, my Stoic toolset will be much needed. I was bleeding internally and I was in a lot of pain. Only bice is truly bad, but kidney pain is no joke either. In the ER and before my emergency surgery took place, I was in a state of shock. What worried me the most were my kids and how this would impact them. I was so scared. In the days and weeks afterwards in the hospital, I had time to reconnect with myself and organize my thoughts. I would like to share with you 3 Stoic themes which greatly helped me while dealing with my mysterious illness. Firstly, how would my role model deal with this situation? How would a strong woman I admire tackle a situation like this? Somebody like my great-grandmother. I thought of her and how she lived her last years with dignity and optimism, despite having one leg amputated. And, as importantly, what kind of role model do I want to be for my kids? How do I want them to remember this difficult time for us as a family? They look at me and learn how to deal with adversity. Secondly, take a broader perspective. The nights in a hospital bed can be long and lonely. Panic started to creep in and I felt really overwhelmed. I tried to remind myself how the Stoics dealt with such tough situations, by putting things into perspective. In fact, although it feels like I'm all alone, I'm not the only one who is struck down by illness. I am connected to other people. Millions of people out there are in similar situations, and most of them do not have the same access to excellent healthcare I am privileged to. 100 years ago, even where I live, nobody would have been able to save my life. Also, everything is constantly changing. This situation, while it feels like it will drag on endlessly, is only temporary, and I will be home and feel better eventually, which fortunately turned out to be true. And thirdly, the one that had the biggest impact for me was the following. Epictetus reminds us that no matter what happens to us, we shall look inside ourselves to uncover the capacity which we have that enables us to deal with the matter on hand. In my situation in the hospital, I had no access to anything I loved around me. It reminded me of living in exile, a situation some ancient Stoics were familiar with. What I did have access to, though, were my inner resources. My endurance to cope with the pain. My patience to accept my slow recovery process. My kindness to deal with my snoring and constantly complaining roommate. Every situation, even and especially grim ones, are an opportunity to practice virtue. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves.
Hey, my name is Erik Hogan. For the past few years, I've been pursuing a calling in adventure and landscape photography. My interest in Stoic philosophy started well before this, but I find that it provides an ideal framework for embracing this type of challenge. My approach to photography involves going into the wild, usually on foot by backpacking, to capture images of remote natural beauty. It blends the physical challenges with the harsh variables of nature and the complex task of technically creating a photograph of the experience that conveys the emotional power of the moment. Elements such as weather, light, and terrain are dynamic and challenging. They can sometimes be extreme. Much of this is beyond my control, but a foundational principle of Stoicism is to focus on what is in our control. So, on one level, I am challenged to rely on my skills as a photographer to create, and creativity as an artist in response to the immediate conditions I find myself in. But beyond that, I must recognize that the only thing really in my control is my own attitude towards these external forces and the resulting choices I make. Often, the most compelling images I make come after accepting and even embracing some very harsh environmental conditions. Stoicism promotes the idea of learning from adversity and of personal growth through experiencing challenges. Photography in the wilderness offers plenty of these opportunities. Under this guidance, I view difficult conditions as chances to improve my technical and creative skills. Often, these images don't turn out as planned. Through failures, I come to focus more on the process than the desired results or any external validation that stems from them. With Stoicism, I develop an emotional equilibrium regardless of the outcomes. All of this leads to a heightened awareness of the present moment, a critical necessity for capturing the essence of a scene in a photo. The Stoics advise us to live in harmony with nature. Does this refer to the natural world? If so, then adventure photography immerses us in nature in a way that forces us to live harmoniously with it simply in order to survive. The experience of shared hardships with the land and moments of sublime beauty give us a feeling of intimate connection with nature like nothing else can. Living in harmony with nature can also refer to our own human nature. I propose that the challenges that backpacking and living in the wilderness impose teach us profound lessons about ourselves, lessons that can only be learned under uncomfortable, uncertain, and potentially perilous conditions. But as we grow through these experiences, we come to understand ourselves and be in harmony with who we are. Then we must consider the ethical implications of how we approach photography in these environments. Our actions and choices can have a direct impact on wildlife or fragile ecosystems, and even the sharing of locations of images can draw more visitors and impact to these areas. So, from my experience, Stoic philosophy is the guide. Study its principles and learn from its many teachers. But the way to progress on the path is to go out into the world and seek difficult challenges. Try, fail, and try again. It's the overlay of experience on these precepts that develops wisdom. Thank you.